So, boys and girls, I have a story for you guys that I actually just told my kids not too long ago as we're going through our Bible story lesson. And for those bigger boys and girls, this is actually found in 2 Kings 6:8-23. And it's called Deliverance at Dothan. And we actually have a few slides for you guys, too, to see. The first slide is actually a map. So this is how Israel used to look in the time of the Bible. And so if you see, Israel is kind of in the middle right there, and then to the top, right side is Syria. And so the king of Syria at that time was Ben-Hadad. And then the king of Israel was, down in Israel and Samaria. And so there was a prophet, Elisha, that lived in Dothan. And so the Syrians and the Israelites were always fighting. And there was one time where King Ben-Hadad of Syria wanted to attack Israel, but God was telling the prophet Elisha everything that King Ben-Hadad wanted to do. And so it would spoil his plans all the time. And so prophet Elisha would tell the king of Israel, and then King Ben-Hadad, his attacks were of naught. And so this made King Ben-Hadad very angry after a while, and he accused his advisors of being spies for Israel. And the servant said, No, we're not traitors, my king, but it is the prophet Elisha who is in Israel who tells the king of Israel the words that you speak in your bedroom. And so the king told his men to go find Elisha. And when they reported that he was in Dothan, a huge army with horses and chariots were sent to capture Elisha. And they traveled at night, and by the morning they had surrounded the city gates. And so Elisha's servant woke up early that morning and saw all the armies surrounding the city. And he was afraid. And he asked Elisha, he said, Master, what shall we do? They're here. And Elisha said, Don't be afraid, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them. And then he prayed, Lord, please open the eyes of my servant so that he can see. And God did. Next slide, please. And the next slide, you can see this is where Elisha shows his servant. And you see the Syrian army is down there. But what do you see up on top in the mountains? What Elisha's servant saw. So Elisha's servant eyes grew big as he saw on the mountains that surrounded them were full of God's angels and their chariots of fire. So when the Syrian army approached the gate, Elisha again prayed, Lord, strike these soldiers with blindness. And God did as Elisha prayed, and the soldiers became blind. They couldn't see. And so Elisha went to them and said, This is not the way. This is not the city. Follow me. So the soldiers followed Elisha, and he led them to the king of Israel in the city of Samaria. Remember in the map, Samaria is not too far from Dothan. When they got there, Elisha again prayed, Lord, open the eyes of these soldiers so they can see. The soldiers were shocked, and they were frightened, because they were in the city of Samaria, the kings of their enemies. And so the Israelite king couldn't believe his eyes either. His enemies were right there in his city. He immediately asked Elisha, Should I kill them? Should I kill them? And Elisha said, No, don't kill them. Instead, give them food and water so that they can eat and drink and go to their master. And so the king of Israel set a feast before them. And after they finished, they went back to King Ben-Hadad. And so we can be pretty sure that the Syrian army was pretty grateful to Elisha, because in 2 Kings 6:23, it says that the Syrian bands no longer came anymore to the lands of Israel. So boys and girls, we have two things that we can learn from this story today that can help us in our everyday lives. Number one is that God is powerful and that he knows everything that our enemies are trying to plot against us. And he can send as vast of an army of fiery chariots and fiery angels that he did for Elisha to save us when we need it. And number two, and this is most important, is that God is also a God of mercy. And he wants us to show our enemies sometimes what he is really like and the mercy that God has for them, because God loves us all. And he came, this is a time when we remember that he came to our earth as a baby because he wants to save us all. And sometimes we can actually avoid enemy attacks when we are nice to them. And so, boys and girls, I hope that you remember this story through the week, and I hope that it helps you to become more like Jesus. In Jesus, thanks.